It's time to find out
What Shane said
with Shane Manila.
What's good, world? I'm back. Another Shane Says. This week, I wanted to dig into wide receivers because that's all I ever talk about. I know. I'm sorry. You know my feelings on running backs. I think you know my feelings on quarterbacks. And I'm just going to do another wide receiver episode. So this stems from a couple weeks ago. We did a Dynasty Trades in 5 stream. Tuesday nights, 8:30. Be there. Check us out. We were talking about trading wide receivers that we thought were mid. Wide receivers that we believed are capped at wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 range. Production generally, which, again, production typically drives value eventually. Obviously, if it's a rookie, that production is not going to be the same as a third-year guy, at least if they produce at similar ranges, how that production is viewed is going to be different. But that's kind of getting off the point. What the point of that show was, or at least that segment was talking about trading away wide receiver 2s, wide receiver 3s. And it kind of evolved in my head to not just that, to actually just selling off excess wide receivers. So what is an excess wide receiver? It's pretty simple to me. An excess wide receiver is when you have multiple wide receivers of the same type. Wide receiver 2 range. You can never have too many wide receiver 1s. That's definitely not what I'm saying. But when we're talking about wide receiver 2s, wide receiver 3s, I'm comfortable with moving off of those wide receivers and making other moves. So what I wanted to do is just highlight some of the wide receivers that I'm talking about so you can have a specific idea, a specific range of wide receivers we're talking about, right? So if you scroll down on KTC, again, if you don't like their site, that's okay. I'm just using it as a barometer. Again, the market uses it, so it's something good to go by. Anywho, I'm talking about wide receivers like Devonta Smith, DK Metcalf, Michael Pittman, Tank Dell, maybe Zay Flowers. I'm coming around on him, but we'll talk about that some other time. George Pickens, T. Higgins, Jordan Addison. I'm not going to talk about JSN anymore. I don't want to be attacked. These are guys that I believe are capped as being wide receiver 2s. Now, in some cases, like Devonta Smith, they're capped because the wide receiver 1 on their roster, on their real NFL team, is elite, A.J. Brown. Jordan Addison is blocked by Justin Jefferson. Unless something unforeseen happens, neither of those gentlemen are ever going to be the wide receiver 1 on their own team, and I don't think they'll be wide receiver 1s in fantasy football. But also, I talked about Jordan Addison, but also wide receivers like Rashee Rice. Rashee Rice had a wonderful rookie season when you look at his points per game and some other metrics. Problem I have with Rashee Rice is as soon as the season ended, or as soon as they could, Kansas City went out and signed Hollywood Brown, or in the offseason signed Hollywood Brown, and then drafted Xavier Worthy in the first round. That speaks to me and says to me, I should say, that Kansas City does not look at him as a wide receiver 1. And even if they do, it's probably going to be more of a collaborative effort as opposed to any one wide receiver being a target hog, which will limit his ceiling. So that's generally what I look at as being a capped wide receiver, a mid wide receiver, an excess wide receiver. So what we want to do is we want to look at our teams and see what what teams or what wide receivers on those rosters are excess. Which ones can we trade away for, let's say, 2025 picks? Or obviously, what players could we use to combine to trade up a tier? So I decided one roster I wanted to look at first is this Central Valley roster. Let's just go ahead and scroll down. If you look at my wide receivers, we've got Chris Olave, George Pickens, Deontay Johnson, Brian Thomas Jr., I think I said George Pickens, Chris Olave, Deontay Johnson, DJ Chark, Chris Godwin. So a lot of wide receiver 2 types. This is a team and this is a roster that I would like to move one of these wide receivers. Now, specifically, the wide receiver that I decided to use in this example is George Pickens. And before you yell at me about George Pickens, yes, I'll play devil's advocate. George Pickens could be better than I think, maybe. He did hit a 28.7% target share in the 4 games without Deontay Johnson. Small sample size, but he balled when Deontay Johnson was out. Though, really, I don't know if that's a good thing in the sense that you want your wide receivers to ball no matter who's there. You shouldn't need Deontay Johnson to be out for you to be a target hog. Just saying. And all apologies to Ray GQ. This is his site, his YouTube channel. So I definitely have to bring up the fact that George Pickens' Trinity score, damn near elite last year. 17th among wide receivers with an 8.5 Trinity score. So that's pretty good. I can't say that it's not. But again, based off what I believe, what I've seen so far of George Pickens, I do not believe that he's elite. I believe he's capped at a wide receiver 2, with or without Deontay Johnson. So what I did is I went ahead and sent out multiple offers in this league. Actually sent out 10 offers. Unfortunately, 4 or 5 of those expired because it's summertime and apparently people don't want to respond. But just practicing what I preach here. George Pickens went down the list. Here's 4 guys that I offered George Pickens for 25 first for. Now, again, these these offers expired originally, so I went back in and did it again today. And then another option is something like this, where I'm offering George Pickens in a third for Amari Cooper in a second. Obviously, it's not a first, but what that would do is give me another wide receiver, Amari Cooper, who's probably going to put up low-end wide receiver 1, but more likely wide receiver 2 seasons, as well as upgrading my pick. And then I could also go right after that, go back to my wide receivers and see if there's any other moves that I'd want to make. But again, I'm waiting on these gentlemen to get back to me, so we'll see. So there was another roster that I wanted to look at, and it has several wide receivers in this range as well. Again, these are excess wide receivers. Anytime you see George Pickens, Tank Dell, Devonta Smith, Jordan Addison, Rashee Rice, Jalen Reed, these dudes, you see these dudes on the same roster, generally they're expendable. Why are they expendable? Well, let's just go back, for example, let's go back to another team, actually. Let's go to another team. We're going to go ahead and check out one of my sleeper leagues, because sleeper is what I really, really like. So give me a second here. Just going to bring that up, share my screen. Okay. Dynasty Trades in 5 Hammer. This is one of our first listener leagues, I think. Maybe. I have no idea. I don't know. I'm kidding. Finished second in this. No, I did not finish second in the last league last year. Actually, I dominated in the regular season with 1 loss and then got knocked out in, I believe, the second or third round of the playoffs. And it was heartbreaking. But that's besides the point. That's not what we're talking about today, Shane. So focus. We're talking about wide receivers, right? So you see at the high end, I got Reek, A.J. Brown. Pretty good twosome. Then I also have Christopher Olave, Amari Cooper, Devonta Smith, Tank Dell. So I have several wide receivers in that same range. Obviously, what I'd like to do is move Amari Cooper because he's the oldest. That's not going to happen. The market for him is probably seconds. So I'm not going to try that. What I'm going to try is moving someone like Devonta Smith, Tank Dell, or Christopher Olave. I do have at least 1 wide receiver on this roster, besides some of the running backs that I could flex in the position. Hello, Devin Singletary in the flex position. I also have Brandon Cooks, who, even in a bad year, Brandon Cooks last year still had 7 games with 14 or more fantasy points. That ain't bad. That ain't bad at all. So what I did is I went out and set a couple trade offers. Again, practicing what I preach. Tank Dell for a first. Tank Dell for a first. Tank Dell for a first. Now, if these offers happen to get rejected, you know what I'll do? Then I'll go back and say, well, how about Devonta Smith for a first? Those get rejected. I'm not offering Chris Olave for a first. Sorry. That's the one dude that I'm going to be convicted on. So, and that's another thing is with this process, you can pick wide receivers that you're higher on than other people, right? You can, in this case, like I said, I have Tank Dell, Devonta Smith, Chris Olave, and Amari Cooper. I'm not saying I need to trade every one of those. I am saying that at least 2 of those guys, if not 3, pretty much the same dude. So I'm willing to move one of them at least. I'm not willing to move Chris Olave though. Back to that point. Point is if you have a player you have a conviction on, cool, be convicted on them. Hold on to them. Don't move them, but don't hold on to all 3 of these guys. That's all I'm saying. So another couple offers I just sent out there were also trying to tier up. I'll move Chris Olave for a deal like this, where I'm trying Devonta Smith and Chris Olave for CD Lamb. I'll also try this, Devonta Smith and Chris Olave for Jamar Chase. That offer has actually been sitting out there for several days. And not to put the other owner on blast in that league, the manager on blast, that dude like 3 days ago was like, "Oh, that's very interesting. I think we can deal. I'm cleaning right now and I'll get back to you." I haven't heard from him since. So I hope that he's okay. Hopefully he didn't slip and fall while he's mopping the floor or something like that, because that would be sad. And what would be really sad is I wouldn't have a trade partner. So again, maybe you love Pickens. Maybe you love Olave. I'm taking Olave out of this. He's better than those guys. Maybe you love Pickens. Maybe you love Devonta Smith. Maybe you love Jaden Reed, Jordan Addison, Rashee Rice. Literally, all these dudes I just named. Going back to KTC. T. Higgins is another guy you can throw in there. Not Keon Coleman. But you get the point. There's several wide receivers in that range. I mean, if you really want to expand the range, you could throw Michael Pittman in that range. You could throw Brandon Ayuk. Now, I'm a little less likely to give up Brandon Ayuk or Michael Pittman for a single first. And quite honestly, with a lot of these wide receivers, I would like to get an additional pick back. I'm not sure that I can do that with Tank Dell. So we'll see. We'll see. But in most cases, if I could, I wouldn't even mind trying to get another third on this. But I'm trying to make some moves in this league also to wake it up. Because, well, it's dead season and no one's trading. And it's really, really annoying me. So going back. Sorry. So let's say you make the deal. Now what? Great. You got an extra first. Well, there you go. You've got an extra first. That's fungibility, right? That is more, we talk about this all the time, or at least I talk about this all the time. The pick is more fungible than the player. The pick, generally, no one dislikes rookie picks. You can dislike a player, though. For instance, just bringing him up, George Pickens. I'm lower on him than Ray GQ is. So if we were in a league, we could do some business. But, let's say Ray had George Pickens and he was trying to trade me him as part of a deal. I'd probably balk. But if Ray had moved Pickens for a 25 first, and that's part of the deal, probably not going to balk. So also, obviously you can make the pick in the future. You can attach that pick to another player and try to get an elite one. So let's say I do move Tank Dell for that 25 first. Okay. Can I then add that first to Devonta Smith and tier up? Again, doing little leaps. We've talked about this before, at least I have on this show. Shane says about making little leaps. I'm pretty indiscriminate. I'm not sure that's a word, but I think it is. I'm pretty indiscriminate on who I request first from. Obviously, there are teams that are absolute powerhouses that I'm going to stay away from and not try to make deals with. But for the most part, I'm sending out this offer to everyone in the league. I'm I'm sending out offers to everyone with firsts in the league. In the league that I showed you, the Sleeper League, the first round picks are incredibly concentrated among 3 or 4 teams. So I unfortunately can't send out offers to everyone in that league. But there's no reason that you need to be as indiscriminate as me. You can be more selective, going to teams that look like they're mid or bad. Obviously, teams that are rebuilding, if you could somehow trick them into giving you one of their first, awesome. Even if it's not a 25, maybe a 26. If it looks like a rebuild that's not going to take just a year, that's what you can do. So again, just a simple concept. I don't want to belabor this. Talking about moving excess wide receivers. Go look at your rosters. Do you have a DJ Chark that you can slip in as your wide receiver 4 if you move Tank Dell? Do you have a Brandon Cooks that you can slide into your wide receiver 4? Hell, do you have several wide receivers like that? Josh Palmer, DJ Chark, Brandon Cooks. Stream them. That's fine. Get that pick. It's more valuable in the long run than a player like Devonta Smith. Not everyone is even going to want to give you a first for those players. I've gotten rejections on several of those George Pickens offers that I made. So it's not a guarantee, but I think try it. Let me know in the comments. Who do you think's mid? Who do you think I'm off on? I think George Pickens is probably going to strike a nerve. I didn't get into JSN at all today. Don't want to talk about that. And I mentioned earlier, just briefly. Sorry. I know I promised this would be quick. I'll just hit this real quick. Zay Flowers had a pretty good rookie season, right? 12.9 fantasy points per game. Rashee Rice had 13.3, but I've already talked about why Rashee Rice is someone that I think is capped. Zay Flowers might not be capped, though. And I understand people think Mark Andrews is the wide receiver one on that team in a tight end body, whatever. I'll just say this. So I went back to 2000. I looked up every wide receiver that played at least 9 games and scored between 11.5 and 13.9 fantasy points. I wanted to give it a little cushion on both sides. And there were 34 wide receivers that did that from 2000 to 2021, 22 of those wide receivers then went on to produce at least one wide receiver one season. At least one. That's 65%. So if you didn't know anything else other than what they scored in their rookie season and you banked on those rookies, you'd have a 65% chance. Past is often predictive of the future, though, of them hitting a wide receiver one season at least in the future. At least one. And then you've got guys like A.J. Brown, Tyreek Hill, Amon-Ra St. Brown, I think he said at least 2, that have had multiple seasons. There were a couple weirdo one-off dudes like Mike Williams, but not the Mike Williams you're thinking about. Mike Williams from back in 2010. So anyway, sorry, that was a long way to getting around to saying that I think I like Zay Flowers. So that's another thing you can do. If you have conviction on one of these dudes that's in the tier, but not the other, hell, try to move Devonta Smith for Zay Flowers. If you have conviction on George Pickens, try to move Devonta Smith for George Pickens. All right, that's all I got. Let me know what you think in the comments. And as always, I appreciate every last one of you. Have a good one.